Good morning and good afternoon, everybody joining us. I can see many people are joining at the moment. The numbers on my little counter here of participants is going up rapidly, which is exciting to see so many people joining us today. In the interest of time, I am going to make a start. So I'd like to say again, good morning and good afternoon to you all. My name is Nicola Grayson. I'm the Head of Public Affairs at Creative Australia, and thank you very much for joining our session today. Thank you very much to our Auslan colleagues who are also here today for this. Thank you for their support, Jody and Erin. Let's begin today's session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many lands on which we gather. For me, I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I extend that respect to all the many lands and peoples that you're joining from. And in the spirit of sharing that knowledge and place, please feel free to acknowledge where you're joining from in the chat function. Just hit the chat button down below. At Creative Australia, we cherish the richness of First Nations peoples' artistic and cultural expressions, and I acknowledge and pay respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us for this session today. It's quite an interesting transition, moving from honouring and respecting thousands of years of First Nations human storytelling to the here and now of artificial intelligence. But indeed, that is what we are here to talk about. In 2024, Creative Australia undertook to publish principles regarding generative AI and creative work. Whilst AI systems have been around for a long time, the growth of generative AI for content creation and the use of copyrighted works to train generative AI has had many consequences and continues to do so. So we developed principles intended to underpin policy and guidance on the development and use of generative AI applications for creative output. They're intended to provide an ethical framework that promote a thriving environment centered on human creativity, that generates opportunities for a broad range of practitioners and businesses supporting artists in their creative practice. The principles are founded on the fundamentals of fairness, transparency, consent, and the centrality of human creativity. Today's session, in essence, focuses on the principle of consent, one of those key principles I mentioned, exploring how it might be possible to protect creative works so that they can't be scraped for training without consent. Whilst the actions and debates surrounding copyright and enforcement continue, it was really exciting to see Australia's National Science Agency, CSIRO, announce this year that a new technique was being developed by their researchers to potentially stop unauthorized AI systems from using photographs and artwork and other image-based content. I'm so delighted that Dr. Li-Ming Zhu, Acting Director of CSIRO's Data 61, who is leading the work in this field, is here today to share more with us. As Li-Ming is speaking, please feel free to ask your questions as we go along by clicking on the Q&A button down below. And I'll curate this once Li-Ming has finished his remarks, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A time together. Also, look out for in the chat box, CSIRO is kindly going to be putting in some useful links as we go through as well. So you might want to pick those up as we go through. But please do ask your questions in the Q&A. So by way of introduction now, Li-Ming is a world-leading expert in AI engineering and safety, and he represents Australia in key international working groups. Thank you so much for joining us today, Li-Ming. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Nicola. Thanks for having me, giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit about the current research work at CSIRO. As Nicola said earlier, we did develop some interesting technologies to prevent AI from learning certain images. And recently, we also have released research on detecting deepfake audio clips. But that's just some of the technologies we work on. As you can see from the title, there's no single fix. I wouldn't claim any of these fix or techniques can 100% protect the copyright works and other kind of deepfakes threats. So I'm going to give you an overview today on some of the areas of we're working on, but then deep dive into two techniques, giving some examples on what we are working on. All right, so first, I think creative work, there's a life cycle around it. Now, increasingly AI assisted. As you can see, originally we have human creating some and authoring some works, and you declare the origin of that at times, and you publish, and sometimes you try to protect it. There are many protection mechanisms in the traditional sense. The work online these days is increasingly being disseminated, and people can derive additional work from it, transform those work in creative ways with permission. Uh, but then we are entering into some interesting space, and AI can learn from this data. While learning this data, they can try to sometimes help artists to complete some very repetitive and boring tasks. At other times, they could learn from some of the existing work with permission or without permission, and actually can start to generate new creative work. But we shouldn't call them creative work, but they are generating some work that can mimic certain styles, and some of the styles might be protected and belong to some of the creative artists. Once we do that, um, then that generated materials is also going back into the cycle again. And increasingly, uh, creative artists are working with AI to do a lot of this co-creation. So there's interesting questions along there to say, so the first type of technology we're working on, by the way, the bolded font, which is most of the work I'm going to touch on briefly, is the CSRO's ongoing work in this space. So the first one actually is an interesting one, not too much in the protection space. It's human agency in creation with AI. For people tracking some of the latest reports from US Copyright Office, they have said AI generated content is not copyrightable. It's interesting to look at the reason behind that. The reason behind that basically is no matter how much you spend on perfecting your prompts, you may spend hours, you may have worked through many revisions of a particular generated work. That's still not copyrightable because they claim that in this space, it's the control, the human control, is actually not that strong. It's the illusion of control because the AI, the generative AI, is largely a very complex model with it's a black box. Many people claim that that it's the analogy people giving these days is as if you are a patron and commission an artist to create some work. Although you can direct, you have paid money, you can give feedback, you can do a lot of detailed instructions, but that doesn't give you the moral rights or the authorship to this particular piece of work. However, AI is part of many artists' daily workflow. Whether you have really exercised your agency, your human agency in creativity, whether it's warrants authorship, or you are merely have an illusion of control of some AI tools and generating something, this is a fascinating question we are working on. And that will guide us in some way to develop AI tools that can inject human agency or giving human intellectual control over whatever you are creating in this space, creative work. So that's one area we're working on. Once you have created some work with AI or without AI, of course, you have some identity you want to attach to this piece of work. There are many ways to attach that. And sometimes you may have different identities online. Sometimes you may be posting something anonymous. So to have some control on that identity and to make sure those information are registered in some registry, some ledger, there are proper attributions around that. It's very important to the downstream publish, protect, disseminate, transform, and AI learning. Because at sometimes we want to know this work is coming from you. Other times the attribution can help to quantify the value you have created. For a particular piece of, I mean, we are working on some exciting research to look at a particular piece of AI generated image to be able to say how much that piece of image coming from this particular image, the attribution and the contribution of that early work. You know, even in the case of with permission, or in the case of without permission, there might be some things that we can record and become a way to protect your rights. Of course, there are many other ways. People are working on hardware level signing. Every piece of kind of camera hardware could embed some of this identity and attribution automatically. Once you have done that, you want to publish and you want to protect it. So that's adversary noise injection. Sounds a very technical term. It's what we said earlier. By carefully inject some noise into a particular picture, it may prevent AI from learning from it. So they cannot use that the feature in that image to generate future image in a similar style. And there's a lot of work out there, and there are even services doing that, and some of you might be aware. But the unique breakthrough of this technology, we will go into a little bit detail early, is to provide some theoretical guarantee that even future better AI will not be able to learn from it, no matter how good they become, because the underlying information, the essence of the information is there already, preventing some further learning. Of course, these days you can also just declare on your website, or a platform can put a special tag or file somewhere to say, do not come to grab this image for learning or for discovery. No AI headers are coming out as well. A lot of them requires the bots or the companies trying to get access to the data or image to respect that. It's voluntary in that way. But also there is a challenges in that, because sometimes you do want AI to discover your artwork. So there are metadata in it you want AI to learn. Sometimes you want even AI to process your entire image to understand the image. Is there a horse in it? Is there a rabbit in it? And what's the artistic style of that? What's the color saturation of it? Those information could be learned, but you only want to use it for discoverability. You don't want it to be used for other purposes. How do you have more fine-grained consent? We sometimes work in computational consent to understand how do we combine these kind of very intricate permissions together to inform and to track them later. Once you have your content and it's starting to be disseminated or transformed for some reasons, there are a number of protection techniques. People have heard about watermarking. We can inject watermarks, including noise, into our watermarking. But I'll talk about watermarking a bit later. But content fingerprinting is another technique. What if we cannot inject watermarks? What if the watermarks has been removed? Is there something about the content? It's just like a fingerprints. You can tell that another piece of work is coming from the first piece of work without watermarking helping that. That's actually humans do that all the time. The time you identify a new piece of work, you say, oh, this work's style looks like the other artist. You are making that judgment, not using any watermarks or special marks. You just can feel it. Of course, AI can be trained or techniques can be invented for that. So even that content has been modified a little bit, we can still tell whether a piece of content is sort of coming from another piece of content without any watermarking or additional metadata. It's just by looking at it and using the fingerprints. Of course, the artworks will be edited. We want those edits to be resistant to attribution, meaning that they will not remove some of the attributions and some of the metadata we have already embedded. So that's another techniques we're working on. And many times we do not rely on just the content itself. If you're only looking at the image itself, there's so much, so little things you can do. There's a limited scope. But you will know who is disseminating the image, where that image has been coming from, who are basically amplifying the distribution. And all this information collectively will help us to track who has created it, who has disseminated it, whether it's a deep fake or not, whether there's other kind of additional information will help us to understand this particular nature of the image. Of course, there are AI discovery and search I mentioned earlier. All right. So now comes to the interesting part. AI is learning from it. So first, if you look at the box itself, I said train and in context. Let me explain what do I mean by in context. Of course, people know AI can learn from millions of images. It can learn from the entire portfolio of artists. That's we call it the training of AI. After AI learns it, it will try to it sort of understand the style and maybe other features of the image or from the artist. However, imagine today, if your work has never been part of the training data set at all, but I upload a piece of image with or without permission to, let's say, ChatGPT or some type of image generator. I say, here's one single image of some origin. Try to create an image in the same style of this image. So these days, AI can actually learn from a single image or maybe 20 images. When you use it, like every day people use AI chatbot, you upload a lot of information. Imagine you upload one image or 20 image to give some sense of the style and you ask AI to learn from it. Of course, AI can do that. Whether it's very good or bad, that's another thing. So copyrighted materials is not only about training AI. Copyrighted materials increasingly is about also when we use AI. And that's the responsibility of another set of players. Maybe that I mentioned the input protection filter. Maybe that's possible for AI system to say, well, you just uploaded some copyrighted protected image. The image says so, already had a watermark in it, or they can do some auto detection to say that image looks like from some artist that they already declared they don't want that to be uploaded. So that's all possible technically by combining set of things. But I do want to draw the attention to training and in-context learning. By the way, the context window in the technical term, how many images you can upload, not to mention text, is into the very size space, very big space. You can upload an entire library of books and to ask AI to learn from it on the spot or in context without ever doing training on them. So that's very interesting. Of course, in here, we also want to, when AI is learning, when a company is training data, a very responsible company might be recording where the data come from, have that logs. And if a piece of data has been requested to be removed, they could do something, sometimes unlearn, sometimes just removing that data sets in future training. And that lineage, that log certainly can be useful in protection. I already mentioned input protection filter, uploading an image or text. But another interesting thing, similar to content fingerprinting, we also have the techniques called model fingerprinting. So every model can be different. What it means is later I will talk about that piece of research in a little bit more details, but just to give you an understanding of that, if I take an AI generated image, these days we have a very high probability.
Hi, apologies all. I think we've lost Leeming for a moment. We'll just bear with and I hope that the connection comes back shortly. Apologies for that. Ah, I see he's dialed out and he's going to dial back in again. So hopefully that will fix it and we'll be back online very, very shortly. Please do bear with us. Yes, someone's popped in the Q&A there. Oh no, yes. I'm hanging. I'm sure he will be back. Here we are. Hi, we lost you for a
Congratulations.
sec there. Welcome back.
I lost the power somehow, which is very rare.
Oh
I hope you
no.
can hear me. Yeah,
We
but
can.
I'm back, and
Thank you.
so that's the first time in my history. Let me just find my slides, and
No
Give me
problem.
1 second. All right, apologies. I think I'm back and you can hear me and see my slides.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I said fingerprinting. Probably you heard if I take an image these days, I could AI generated image. I could tell whether it's coming from one particular AI service or the other with a very high probability with a particular model. That's possible. And I also mentioned the unlearning as well. So I'm giving you a very high level taste of what are some of the areas of research we're working on and give you some sense of AI learning is not that simple, training in context and the entire life cycle. So what are, and around all of this, I promised to talk about watermarking and first, all this, provenance and the integrity of the provenance that they are not being modified is very important. Also, the detection and attribution of protection removal is quite important. We're working on it. Somebody may remove all these protection mechanisms. How do we detect whether it has been removed or not? And how do you detect who removed what? That can play a very important role in deterring a reputable actor not doing something. And finally, watermarking and labeling. Australian government is already from the National AI Center is developing some kind of guides together with Data61. So that guide may be coming out very soon as a voluntary guide on thinking about how do we do watermarking and labeling. All right, let's move on quickly to some of the challenges we're facing. There are a lot of costs and trade-offs of these protection mechanisms. For example, I already said you want your AI, your artwork to be discovered online. Sometimes involves AI learning from it a little bit, not learning to generate something, but to learn what's in the image. Not only look at the metadata to say this text metadata. They may want to protect, enable that. And how do you do that? To express that intent very clearly, and hopefully some of the bot crawlers are respecting that. Privacy and anonymity. Sometimes we post things online anonymously, and if you have metadata captured not in the right way, that anonymity you could be re-identified in it. So a lot of the challenge in using some of the very, very good C2PA, which is the international standard on provenance and fingerprinting technologies, can somehow breach privacy. Also, in integrity versus visual fidelity, I said I can inject noise so that AI cannot learn from it. But what if that noise also slightly alters the image and prevents certain type of things from being happening? That may not being too much of an issue because most of the when people visually look at a piece of image, because most of the time the human eyes cannot detect that noise at all. But if you're using that image for industrial purposes, for other purposes, it may create some problems. And the next one is perceived risk, trust, and actual truth. So people use cryptographic tagging a lot. I can explain that later if people are interested. To prove that this piece of file or image is from me and the information about this piece of file is not being altered afterwards. But it doesn't tell whether this piece of image is created by AI or me or by if some of the metadata is not accurate because that's not the role of the cryptographic tagging or signing. And a lot of times also a lot of these techniques has a false positive. I don't remember whether people remember when Instagram automatically starting to label whether something is AI generated or not. The first batch of people that they have harmed is actually artists. Artists use AI tools every day. If the automatic labeling suddenly label your work as AI generated, which is not true, and it's a false positive, it's a huge reputation damage. It sometimes cannot be easily recovered once that's out. So how do we reduce that false positive, which is extremely difficult, I can tell you, because AI and human are working so closely these days on a lot of the workflow. All these techniques have an implementation cost, whether it's infrastructure cost or technical computational cost and ongoing management. Imagine you're tracking all this metadata, everything. We have to consider that when we recommend some technologies to be used. Um, and a lot of times, the people who are shouldering the cost of these protection mechanisms may not be aligned with the benefits that we'll receive from it. And a lot of creative artists will probably experience this. The cost benefits is misaligned, which makes the incentives to implement some protection mechanism a bit tricky. And finally, I mentioned a few times, uh, AI is changing the way people work. So there's a lot of creative ways of using AI together with human creativity. And if we are too strict on the rules on when AI can be used or not used, whether it's AI generated or not, we may prevent many of the creativity in this space. This is a very basic slide. I don't intend to go through each row of it. I'm happy to share the slides after the presentation. What I'm trying to say here is people talk about protection mechanisms, but there is a cost of the protection already mentioned. But there's also a cost of removal. Is that very easy to remove? If you have some watermark and people just do some easy transformation or take a picture of the screen of that image, the watermarks are gone. So the ease of technical removal, there's a cost in that. So there's an asymmetry. Sometimes the cost of implementation is very high, but so easy to remove. Is that worth it? On the other hand, the detectability of a removal or breach is also important. When something is removed, do you know? And is it easy to detect? And even if it is easy to detect and easy to remove, can you track down who actually removed that? Is it a particular actor, particular organization? Of course, it will create some deterrence. I'm largely talking about reputable actors and people. Criminals sometimes can ignore everything, and it's hard to implement some mechanism to do that. But reputable organizations, institutions, if the deterrence of being find out that things are being removed and removed by them with credible evidence, that will create some deterrence. Even some of the techniques are very easy to remove. So I think this asymmetry and consideration can play a lot of roles. For example, I'm just going through probably one role, adversary noise injection we have developed. Implementation cost is medium. Every image you need to carefully compute and inject some special image noise. And to remove that is actually not easy. You have to actively remove that. It's possible, but you will always leave some trace. We can tell whether the protection has been removed, and removing them will be able to trace back to some kind of model owner level. So it's a moderate and a strong deterrence. There are a few other ones. Conscious of time, I won't go into details, but considering this, and we are doing empirical studies, we're trying to understand this cost. We will inform where we put what technology to be there to protect along the AI creative lifecycle. All right, I'm going to jump into two special pieces of work. This was the one Nicola mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that we can inject noise to stop AI from learning key features. First, you see a lot of similar work actually going on around, but many of the other work is a try and error. You basically say, look, I injected some noise, AI cannot learn from it, but then AI becomes better and say, oh, after all, I can learn from it. So the key, the theoretical breakthrough, as I mentioned earlier, is being able to prevent future AI. No matter how AI becomes, we can still prevent it from learning. So it's going back to the information theoretical point of view to see, is there enough information here to learn for certain things? But because we understand whether there's enough information for something, we could actually carefully engineer it so that it can prevent it from learning on certain things, but not prevent learning from other things to still enable some discovery that enabled by AI, which I think is very important. And this technology certainly is useful beyond art. It protects sensitive IP. It could protect generating deep fakes from facial images. There's a wide range of applicability. We're looking for commercial partners to work on worse. And another piece of related technology is unlearning. So sometimes there is a model, you have learned something, but what if people say, please remove my piece of work? Is that possible to unlearn? Yes, it is possible. It's very hard. So I think, but that's a promising direction we are also exploring. Another piece of work I want to mention is the detecting the integrity and AI origin. So first, if you look at the colorful image at the bottom, that's what I mentioned. When you have a AI generated piece of image, each colored region is actually from a unique AI model or AI provider. When it looks, as you can see, the clusters are very clear. You can pretty much tell, but there's also overlapping spaces. So it's not 100%, but you can know which AI model have generated that. That's very useful to that. At least you find the model provider to probably have a discussion and to look into what happened there. Uh, the second one is actually another very interesting thing. So a lot of times there are protection mechanisms inside the model or around the model already protecting certain creative artwork or the deep fakes from happening. Those not every company providing those services are actually training their model from ground up. So they take an open source model, they host it, they say, I have enabled the safeguards. Of course, this is not a 100% sure thing. Sometimes it will not protect 100%, but at least they are trying. They are basically have exercising reasonable effort, and it's sometimes it's good enough. Even there are things skipping through, it's fine. But sometimes there are companies de deliberately remove some of the safeguards and without telling you. So secretly removing it, claiming we are using a safe model, we are enabling the safeguards, but actually they are removing that. So we have developed technology to detect whether the safeguards claimed to be enabled is actually enabled. This can be detected from the public side. You don't have to go into the company to do audits, to see them. It is possible to detect from outside by asking some smart questions, uploading some smart generation tasks to find that. So I think that's an interesting direction, leveraging together with the model fingerprinting to do that. The last point I want to make is Australia actually is leading in this space, in many of the detection space. So in International AI Safety Network, there are three streams. There's one stream called AI generated content risk and how to protect that. It's a wide ranging of research agendas in it. And in it, at the moment, Australian is actually co-leading with Canada to set the international research agenda for that particular theme, especially looking at not just the image itself, but wider semantic cross-model signals to detect AI-generated content and its attribution. So it's a very exciting space that the CSRO is working in. All right, I'm going to just stop here and hear a few takeaway messages. So first, protection is a life cycle wide task, no single silver bullet. Carefully combining the technologies to build a stronger protection, deterrence, and evidence of rights enforcement is very important. It's not preventing certain things 100%, but it's to deter, collecting evidence, and protecting at a reasonable posture. Each safeguard does have its cost and trade-offs. I think a lot of the debate is not on the technical side. On the technical side, we say these are the best practice, but people may argue it's too costly and it's not worth doing it because it can be easily removed. What's the point of doing that costly protection? Costs, trade-offs. We can do studies, empirical tests. We can try to provide genuine evidence to see is this costly or not, whether the trade-off is right or not. Of course, the final decision of the trade-offs are the wider community, are the creators making that trade-off decisions themselves sometimes, giving that rights, that technology like noise injection to you. So you can make that trade-off. And other times it's the community coming together to make a decision on that trade-offs. Our role at CSRO is to enforce that from a technical point of view, detect any violation. And in this space, we are not domain expert of creative industry in any regard. So we need both innovation, we need collaboration to make this happen. So we very welcome collaboration to test these techniques, to improve them, and to scale them up for a very healthy and trusted Australian creative ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. That was absolutely fascinating. I'm sure everyone will agree. And we have got some questions that have come through, which is fantastic. So we might just move to some of those now. The first one is interesting. You touched briefly on this about those uh, protections or the consent model being seemingly in place, but then actually behind the scenes is being switched off. And this question relates to that. So Daniel asked, with some content being edited and modified in some various editing platforms, how can we mitigate the risk that our work we've created from being used and trained on their platforms? One thing they've noticed is that we're using your content to train AI warning, it's defaulted to being on and you can't necessarily switch it off, or maybe you can, but it's defaulting to being on.
Mm.
So that obviously can cause quite a bit of concern. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of this, as I said, is it's not exactly a technical question whether something is on and off
Mm,
by default, whether some of the tags as no AI is expressive enough, fine-grained enough, these things is how people implement that. That's why I said there are many other protection mechanisms to be there. So it's rather than relying on that alone, of course, you can do something with the image that you have generated, created yourself by embedding watermarks. Some are very difficult to remove. You can inject such noise, as I mentioned earlier, and downstream there are also ways to detect even content fingerprinting. Even if you have nothing in there, that's still being able to do that. But because of the there's nothing 100% can tell this model has learned from a particular image. It's very hard to be 100%, which is as a science, as a science, the nature of science is a lot of things are not 100%, but it's the probability of that, and sometimes we can improve that a lot, and also a lot of these technologies is helping you to in a way collect evidence or collect enough evidence is a collective set of evidence, the strength of the evidence that may be to help you enforce your rights. So that's definitely something we are working on.
thank you. And concerns come through about accessibility tags and whether word descriptions of images actually make it easier for AI bots to find the content and learn from it. Is that something that we should be concerned around?
Yes. So whether the early AI or these days, that text and image pair actually has really launched, basically helped AI a lot since the beginning. The very early image net is about scraping millions of images with already human put a tag on it. So they know the correct answer. When you train the AI, you don't have to have human to label them one by one. Someone already labeled that through that. So it definitely helps AI to do that. A lot of the, I think, no AI or no search bot crawler tags basically will allow you to specify, please do not touch that file at all, not even metadata is possible. However, of course, it's whether people respects that is a different thing.
Mm,
And then
mm,
you may want the piece of work to be discoverable by a search engine.
mm.
And it's a reasonable ground to do that. So it's a trade-off again over there. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned that what it's difficult for AI tools to unlearn content. So does this mean that there's a closing window for implementing protections?
Yeah, in a way, so as you know, depending on how big is the model, how complex is the model, and the model are being continuously retrained. So it could be unlearned, just meaning in the next training round, when we train again, especially from ground up, do not have this data anymore. So that's definitely easy to do. But if there's a model has been trained with tens of millions of dollars, and if in operation you say there's one piece of training data over there, we want to unlearn from it. It's a both technically kind of challenging, but also costly can be in that case. And when you untrain something, unlearn something, it also have unintended consequences. I mean, it's probably not too much in artistic image or things, but in other spaces, unlearning something will also have unintended consequence. Because let's imagine this is not a creative art space, but let's imagine uh, you 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 have a certain minority groups data in there, and that's not a lot of data. And by removing certain data points, the accuracy for that minority group will decrease. So removing your own data also harm the group in some way if that's something that is beneficial. So it's sort of complex in that space.
Mm.
But I think people are working on it. In some cases, it's doable.
Great, thank you. And we've got a question here about what tools are available for written creative work. So, for example, is noise injection still available at the website level? The person that's raised this question said she blocks scrapers on the website that they use, but sometimes it accidentally blocks real people as well. Is there any
Mm.
advice you can give there?
Yeah. I think text is much more difficult than image, of course. Uh, but the in terms of it again depending on when AI is using it. So it could be using them in training, as there's so much text. Sometimes the unique value of a piece of content may not that be high in terms of AI learning from it. And remember, AI can learn from it through in-context learning, meaning even it's not in the training, when they use it, people can copy paste that piece of text to say, write just like this way, this style. And then people these days to say, I want the AI to write in my own style. Here's my email history of the last 20 years, and they can sort of even learn in context without doing retraining. So it's depending on really whether you're injecting noise during the usage, preventing in-context learning, or in the original training. That's also have different techniques and implications.
Mm, absolutely. We've got an interesting question here about from somebody asking from the concept of submitting their grant or an award application
Mm.
and a slight nervousness about false positives. So if
Mm.
those assessing are looking at whether those applications have been written using AI, what, how reliable are those checkers, or can they easily come back with false positives and things be read as AI when in fact they're not?
Not very reliable, I would say. And sometimes even the false positive rate is very low. Let's say 1% of time it makes a mistake. It's highly, but still it may have a reputation damage on things. So even ultra low false positive can have an issue. Not to mention it's not that reliable at all at the moment.
Mm, yeah. Interesting. And my
But
colleagues.
by the way, I think just to say, a lot of the time people feel there are a few AI characteristics, the tendency to use M dash. And Sam Altman, I think OpenAI CEO just said the other day, finally they have fixed the problem. So if you in your custom instruction says do not use M dash, it will respect that. But that's both good news and bad news for detection side. Of course, a lot of people say, oh, a lot of bullet points, a lot of bolded phrases. That's AI. But there are human just write in that way. So it's a bit tricky. We used to have a joke to say delve. AI uses the word delve a lot. And later we figured out the reason it uses delve a lot. It might be because during the early kind of human feedback type of training, they are largely done in low-cost countries like Nigeria. In Nigeria business English, delve is a very, very normal word. It's a very sophisticated word. So delve is a Nigerian English for whatever we use that for. And that's sort of being leaked into the training, and that's why Delve has been a lot. So we're not discriminating against the Nigerian business English in a way, but there's people find it very fascinating that certain things are
Mm,
split through in that way.
mm. And obviously, I'm going to
Mm.
say something really obvious to everybody now, but this is an incredible, it is complex and it feels deeply overwhelming in many ways. And one of the people in listening to us today has asked a very good question. Do you have a recommendation for a resource or a book for people who are new to AI and really are trying to get their heads around this and want to learn more? Specifically, if there's anything for the writing community or indeed for creatives more generally.
Um, Probably I don't have any book recommendation these days. So I have written recently, I have written two books, but probably not for the general audience. One is on responsible AI, how to do it properly, but on a technical
Mm,
level. The other is on AI engineering. But the reason I mention those two books is actually the publishers also kind of confronted with the future of book writing and whether people read books anymore, whether they go to AI to get the answer, especially in nonfiction books. Imagine you want to learn a topic. People go to YouTube and other places. I
mm,
would say there's a lot of great resources on YouTube and other for general audience to learn what is AI, how to work that. It's definitely worth looking at. I'm not saying you should always use AI to learn, but AI can, if used in the right way, you can learn a lot of things from it. I try to learn from AI on a topic a lot as well. So yeah, but if you're interested, you can come to CSRO's website. We do have some materials for general audience to understand what we are working on. And for the technical audience, we'll have heaps of materials over there.
mm. Thank you. And thanks, Jesse, for putting in some links on behalf of leaning into our Q&A there. Thank you. How long have we got? We've got a little bit more time. So I've got a couple more questions as well. Oh, and my colleague's just pointing one out to me now. Thank you very much. Right, let me just find this one. Oh, here we are. Yes. Thank you. So someone is concerned about competition, publishers and agents, competitors, sorry, concerned about competitors, publishers and agents using AI to process. No, I've misread that entirely. Let me start this again. This person's concerned about publishers and agents using AI to process submissions and indeed during competitions as well. Is there anything writers can do to protect their work in a PDF format?
Probably not much, whether it's text or PDF. And of course, PDF, depending on how you generate the PDF, a lot of times it's just text. Actually, AI just extract the text from PDF. But some PDF, as you know, it can take picture and generating PDFs in that way. However, there's a fascinating recent study to show actually pictures of text works as well as the text itself. So a lot of the in the past, people feeling maybe I extract the text, I must use this OCR software to extract the text, then it will work.
Mm,
But image directly can work very well, and they are highly can be compressible, and there are other features in it. In a way, you can imagine the human eyes are looking at a picture, not text in a way. So AI, in a way, trained can look at the picture of text and work as well. So maybe that's not too much difference there. But in terms of AI is used everywhere. And I'm in the academic community. There are conferences, basically AI reviews the paper. In some way, they compare with human reviewers, they assist human reviewers, certainly in a very responsible way. But you can imagine in times in a lot of high pressure review tasks, it's not that human is not good enough, but human are not really spending enough time reading those contexts. I may have only 20 minutes to read a 30-page grant proposal and make some decisions. In that way, AI could assist that human to find out answers better and play an important role in that. So I wouldn't say AI shouldn't play any role in reviewing things, but there's ways that CSR are also working on that. There's a ways to have a responsible AI assistant on the side to help reviewers.
mm. I think that's that's the thing, isn't it? Is one thing having AI, using AI as a genuine tool, and in service of you and what you're trying to achieve,
Mm,
and AI being used entirely without your control or self-determination. It seems there's quite a distinct difference between the two.
mm, mm.
Mm. So let's just look for a moment, if we can just go back to the watermarking that's being developed. Do you see this? Do you see watermarking tools being helpful or particularly beneficial for creatives, and they're being developed in that way as a way of helping to protect loss of IP and copyright? Or is that technology more being developed in a consumer protection sense so that consumers can see whether or not this is in fact human generated work or AI generated work?
Yeah, I would say both. The watermarking is a collection of mechanisms, have different types, ways of doing watermarking. People can say embedded, invisible, and depending on what you want to embed, you can embed your author name and other things. And the Australian government, through the National AI Center, is developing with Data Sichuan a watermarking and labeling guide. That's for actually declaring whether something is AI assisted, AI generated in that way. So the techniques can be used for both scenarios, and they have certainly pros and cons and cost of using them.
Mm, thank you. And let's turn for a moment about global technical standards. And it's really fantastic to hear that work you're doing and with Canada. And you mentioned actually Australia is leading much of this space, which is great. Do you think global technical standards should be a priority to create an ethical and fair system? And do they make a difference to how the technology then is being developed?
Yeah, absolutely. In Australia, we have been developing like de facto standards, like guidelines on AI watermarking, labeling, as you know, and AI safety standards. I think standards plays two different roles. One is standards is a capture of the best practice. And I often say science, there's no border. That's science is science. What's the best practice is the best practice. It's up to the stakeholders, to the creative community and the government to say whether some standards is mandatory or voluntary.
Mm,
And all things considered, we are not in that space, but we're trying to say, here's a set of best practice. Do it and you will benefit from it. So standards internationally, including Australian developing standards and influencing international community is an important thing. And the other one is interoperability. Of course, AI-generated content, learning is international. Internet has no border. So having interoperability in this space is very important, and we are also working on it.
mm. Um, Leeming, the music industry, of course, is an area which has been significantly impacted. What promising tools are out there, or technologies are there on the horizon for protecting music recordings? Have you come across any?
Right. So ourselves, remember the noise injection into images. We certainly are working on into audio and other places to make sure whether it's deepfake audio detection, as you may have read on our news release recently, and Jesse in the chat may share that already. We're working on deepfakes, but the same technology also potentially works for music as well. But that's just starting. We don't have anything right now for music itself, but for audio deepfakes and other things, we have been working on it for a while.
Mm. Yeah, wonderful. That's good news. And yes, are there, sorry, I've got another question here that I would like to get to. Yes, are there watermarks for human AI collaborations too? Is it acceptable for authors to use AI in their work? I don't think you're necessarily wanting to comment on that last one. That's a debate that will go on for some time, I'm sure, but certainly that question around, that's interesting, watermarks for human AI collaboration.
Right. So you can put anything into a watermark in some way. You could say it's AI assisted or AI generated or whatever the right word. You can acknowledge AI's role or no AI whatsoever as well. So um, that's why I mentioned earlier we are working on how much AI, human influence is in the collaboration, how much AI, human intellectual control agency is in that. And I think these days, the first question when we do AI watermarking and labeling is, what about AI grammar checking? I think it's okay to use AI to check your writing's grammar. And if, is that something we need to label everything and watermark it? It's certainly once you label everything as AI assisted or generated or involved, then it becomes meaningless. Every piece of work is that. So we have to make a trade-off in that space on what is the place to watermark and label AI generated or assisted content.
Yeah. A couple of people have mentioned in the Q&A that they're not seeing the links that we've been referring to. If you have a look for Jessie Staples is the person who's been uploading those links. Thanks, Jessie, on behalf of CSIRO. So if you just scroll back up through, you should be able to spot those. But when we put this, when we link to this on our website, we'll provide those links as well. We'll send a note back out to you all about that. So you'll be able to see them. We've still got a couple of minutes left, and there's still questions coming in. Thank you, everyone, for your great engagement in this session today. Interesting question here about, can you recommend a guideline for visual artists to do content fingerprinting and make an edit-resistant attribution? Does such a thing exist yet?
Definitely exist in the research space, and we have published paper in this space. In my slides, there are some reference to these papers and published code that technical audience can use. But I wouldn't say because CSR doing the science, we don't have a commercial offering of those things. And internationally, I think there are things out there, might be one better than the other in terms of reliability. If you search, you can find some of them. But again, I think no single fix because that alone may not doing much. But certainly you can look out for those development. It's very rapid development.
Mm. Thank you. So we've probably come to about the end of the questions now, but I'm also very conscious that there's a lot of questions about copyright, of course, loss of copyright, and what is happening in that regulatory space. And that's not a topic we're covering today. Obviously, we've come at this very much from the sort of science research perspective. But what we're very keen to do is to continue on a series of webinars around topics for in the AI space that you would love to hear about. So as I'm just wrapping up, if you we'd love to hear from you in the Q&A, or indeed you can email us after this session with any ideas you've had of particular topics you'd like us to cover in the generative AI space. It's very clear that, you know, we're all on an incredibly steep learning curve, and there's lots of education we can do in this space together. We can learn together, and certainly at Creative Australia, we are also very keen to connect with you all and hear your concerns and hear ideally as well some of your solutions and how you are using AI, because we are actively engaged in talking with government counterparts to help the policy thinking in this space. We are keen to continue being advocates on behalf of the creative sector, and of course developing out our AI principles that I mentioned at the start that we have. And if you haven't seen those, they're on our website, our generative AI principles, and recommend you having a read of those. We consider those to be a continual under continual review, and we will update them regularly as this fast-moving technology continues to evolve. Sorry, my colleague Zoe is sitting over to my side here. Did you have a final message you wanted me to just relay there? Oh, just exactly that. Okay, good. Yes, thank you. Oh, good. I did my job. Thanks, Zoe. It was just a reminder, yes, to please let us know about future topics in this space. Pop it in the Q&A or email us. Anyway, thank you so very, very much, Li-Ming, for all your work in preparing for today's session and sharing your learnings with us. We are so excited to see where this work does get to, and perhaps afterwards, I might share with the audience some of those things. We didn't get to that last question, which I promised I would, is like, what's next for you? I'm so sure we're all keen to hear about that. So in terms of working in this space and continuing on this really, really important work for the creative sector, we're delighted that you're doing this. And thank you very much. And thank you all for joining. We'll say goodbye for now. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye.